to Mirai Language Systems iStart Chinese app. This introductory course is aimed at absolute beginners who want to learn Standard Mandarin. Standard Mandarin is now also known as Modern Standard Chinese. China is a huge country with a population of over 1 billion people, comprising over 50 ethnic groups. The biggest group by far, making up about 90% of the population, are the Han people. The Han people speak Hanyu, the Chinese language, which can be divided into 7 major dialects, which share the same written form but have very different spoken forms. Of those 7 dialects, Mandarin is the most widely used, spoken by over 70% of the Han Chinese. It is taught in schools and used in universities all over China, and the majority of films, TV, and radio shows are made in Mandarin. It is the official language of the People's Republic of China, but also Taiwan. It is one of the official languages of Singapore. If you know Mandarin Chinese, you'll be able to communicate with over 1 billion people. This course by Mirai Language Systems will provide you with the essential language fundamentals for communicating in Mandarin Chinese. Mirai Language Systems bases its language courses on 3 basic principles. First, language learning should be fun, stimulating, and enjoyable. Second, language instruction should be logical, well-paced, and consistent. Third, language instruction and learning should be goal-oriented, with the objective of making you, the learner, functionally proficient in actually speaking and understanding the Chinese language. With courses that adhere to these core principles, Mirai Language Systems strives to change the way people learn languages. Let's explain how this language application is organized. Each lesson is broken down into 4 distinct but complementary parts. 1. The tutor section, which is where you are right now. 2. The summary section, which summarizes the main language points made in the lesson, focusing on pronunciation and writing. 3. The vocab section, which lists the new vocabulary introduced in the lesson. 4. The quiz section, which is a short interactive quiz to self-test and consolidate what you've learnt in the lesson. The dialogue in the tutor section can be paused and returned to at any time. By tapping on the speaker icon at any point in the dialogue, the playback will continue from that point on. This application allows you to choose the pace you want to learn at. To obtain the best results from using this course, please relax while listening to the dialogue and try not to force yourself to memorize anything. Feel free to repeat each lesson as often as you need to before moving on to the next lesson. A lot of learning will come naturally from repetition. This course is paced for absolute beginners. We introduce 5 basic vocabulary items per lesson and explain the language points and expressions associated with them in some detail. Our focus is on a very accurate and thorough coverage of the basics, to help you with basic communication in Chinese and to provide you with a solid basis of knowledge for further study. iStart Chinese uses a native English-speaking guide as well as 2 native Chinese speakers. Let me introduce you to the speakers of this language course. First, let me introduce you to Ellen, our female native Chinese speaker.
Hello, I'm Zhu Yanlan.
And our male Chinese native speaker, Frank.
Hello, I'm Zheng Xiaohuan.
And I'm Tom, your native English-speaking guide. Let's start Lesson 1. In this lesson, we'll be looking at the Chinese writing system and the tones for spoken Mandarin Chinese. As pointed out earlier, Mandarin Chinese shares the same writing system as the other dialects of Chinese, such as Cantonese. The writing system of Chinese dates back thousands of years and are based on pictographs. These pictographs evolved into the current Chinese characters. There are now over 50,000 Chinese characters, but only about 2,000 are needed for basic literacy in Chinese, for instance to read a Chinese newspaper. In the late 1950s and early 60s, the People's Republic of China began to introduce simplifications to Chinese characters in an effort to boost literacy. Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan were not affected by the reform. These new characters are referred to as simplified Chinese characters and are officially used in mainland China. The original characters, still in use in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, are referred to as traditional Chinese characters. There is, in fact, still a significant amount of overlap between the two sets of characters. In this course, you can choose whether you want to learn simplified or traditional characters in the settings page of this app. The default setting is simplified characters. Since Chinese characters are based on pictographs, they are basically designed to convey meaning, not pronunciation. In contrast, the English language uses the Roman alphabet, which is phonetic. Since the 1950s, the People's Republic of China has adopted a phonetic system for transcribing Chinese, called pinyin. Pinyin is a phonetic alphabet of standard Mandarin Chinese, which uses Roman letters. It is used to teach Mandarin Chinese and is now used in mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Singapore. So we use pinyin to help us learn how to speak and understand Mandarin Chinese and Chinese characters in their simplified or traditional form to read and write Chinese. In this app, in the tutor section, you can toggle between pinyin and Chinese characters by tapping the speech bubbles of the text spoken by the Chinese narrators. The iStart Chinese app shows both pinyin and Chinese characters for all the basic vocabulary covered, with a flexibility and convenience that is practically inconceivable using other materials or tools for learning. The iStart Chinese course was specifically designed for iOS devices. Now let's move on to talk about syllables and tones of Mandarin Chinese. One of the features of Chinese is that each syllable is associated with meaning. In fact, each syllable has a Chinese character. The Chinese language does not have a lot of distinct sounds, like, say, English has. In order for the Chinese to distinguish the meanings of words with the same pronunciation, they put tones on the words. That's why Chinese is called a tonal language. Mandarin Chinese has 4 distinct tones, plus a so-called neutral tone, which is thought of as a syllable that lacks a tone. It is extremely important to learn the tones of words as well as their pronunciation, since the tone completely changes the meaning of a word. Let's explain the tones in more detail. The Chinese tones have pitch shapes, called contours. This means that the pitch level of the tone on a syllable rises, falls, or stays flat. Let's look at the pitch levels of a tone first. For the sake of illustration, let's split the sound pitch into 5 different levels. We'll label the lowest tone pitch with the number 1 and the highest pitch with the number 5. So, a tone can have a low pitch of 1, a mid-low pitch of 2, a mid-pitch of 3, a mid-high pitch of 4, or a high pitch of 5. Note that these pitch levels are not absolute. They are relative to an individual's tone range they are comfortable using when speaking. They will differ from person to person. Let's start with an example of a Chinese word. The syllable ma, when spoken in the first tone, means mother in Mandarin Chinese. Let's hear our native speakers say the word mother in Chinese.
妈
妈
The tone is high and flat. We say it as a 5-5 contour because it starts at the high pitch level 5 and stays at that level, ending at pitch level 5. We can also describe the first tone as a high flat tone. We show the first tone in pinyin by writing a macron on the syllable. The easiest way for you to practice this tone is to pitch it at a high but comfortable level. Say the English word zoo and hold the tone. Remember this pitch as your high 5 note. Now let's look at the second tone, using the same syllable, MA, but this time using